Hello and welcome to ET India Boardroom. On this panel, we will be discussing Healthtech, the next billion-dollar startup opportunity. Our panelists for today are Dr. Kamini Walia, scientist at the ICMR in New Delhi, Ashutosh Garg, who's author and founder of Guardian Pharmacy, and Gaurav Agarwal, the co-founder of TATA 1mg. Gaurav, let me start the conversation with you. As 1mg has evolved from being an online pharmacy to more of a broad-based health tech player, how have your individual perspectives on the pharmaceutical value chain, how has that changed, and what are the newer opportunities that you see emerging?
Thank you for having me on this panel. This is a great question. I think for us, even back when we started 1mg in 2015, we were very clear that we weren't a pharmacy company, we were actually an integrated healthcare company. And 1mg's vision statement since the time has always been to create an integrated healthcare platform that made healthcare understandable, accessible, and affordable. In 2016, actually, we started in 2015. In 2016, we actually integrated diagnostics into our platform. We always started with content. We also integrated consultations. And since then, we've been operating an integrated platform. Pharmacy, of course, commands the lion's share in terms of mindset and also revenue in the Indian healthcare ecosystem. So I think more than 1mg platform's transition to health tech, I think it's the consumer and the ecosystem sort of transition that has happened more from just pharma to actually health tech. Now, if I think about what opportunities are emerging, I see that overall we are seeing a deepening, like a massive deepening of the health tech healthcare ecosystem in the country. And if we start from the payer side, we are seeing a deepening on the payer ecosystem in general around insurance. Typically, we've always seen insurance as a simple policy, and people switch policies every year. They switch probably to the cheapest policy, but we are starting to see more and more nuanced policies coming around, ones that have benefits, ones that give you micro sort of use cases, micro insurance use cases, etc. One that gives you, other healthcare access points, give you outpatient insurance benefits, underwrite some of additional risks around your health, right? So the payer ecosystem itself is undergoing a huge change, and 1mg is deeply involved with that ecosystem as a benefits layer. If you come to the commerce, the therapy area, then that itself is deepening, where I think the horizontal space of e-commerce in health is maybe taken to a large extent by the likes of TATA 1mg and Pharmacy, etc. But we are seeing deepening in therapies. So today you have a ton of providers doing diabetes reversals, diabetes disease management, etc. We could not imagine technology-enabled categories like this to exist maybe 5-10 years ago, but today they are there are enough takers. And all of this is built on top of, let's say, the ecosystem that the likes of 1mg have gone out and built, where the commerce layer is at least taken care of really, really well. I think an additional opportunity that's emerging is we've always known that data is the holy grail of healthcare, right? The problem in India has been that digital data is just inaccessible. It doesn't exist, right? And
right.
I keep giving this example that when I go to my parents' house and they go see a doctor, they take out these files, which are like 10 years old, they find the right documents, right papers, and always something's missing. Now, what's happening and what maybe a lot of us are not noticing is the likes of 1mg are starting to generate and have been generating tremendous amounts of this data. And what's beautiful is that all of this data is digital. 1mg today sits on billions of healthcare data points around across pharmacy, diagnostics, consultations, and we can bring and we can build for the first time a longitudinal view of health for a user, right? And that in itself will just generate a tremendous set of opportunities across the ecosystem. So overall, I think the opportunity set is deepening from commerce to therapy to supply chain. I think there's just tons of opportunities happening, and it's actually a great time to be in the healthcare ecosystem.
Excellent, excellent. And let me pick up on that. And Ashutosh, if I come to you, Guardian was one of the first really to start off on the organized retail pharmacy journey. And if you look at it, the India pharma supply chains did have and still continues to have challenges around demand forecasting, inventory levels, expiries, and so on and so forth. In your journey, how relevant has technology been in terms of helping solve some of these issues and really introduce more efficiency in this value chain?
Thank you, Parijat, for inviting me. I mean, I enjoyed listening to Gaurav's comments about 1mg, and I think you guys are doing an amazing job in building the pharma or the healthcare ecosystem in our country. But let me try and share with you some perspective from Guardian. I exited from the company 5 years ago, but I do stay in touch, and you're absolutely right. When we started in 2003, we were one of the early movers in the organized retail chain. I think it's very important for our viewers and listeners to understand that there are two distinct segments available as far as the pharmacy business is concerned. One is the 800,000 shops that are there across the entire country, which cater to the needs of one tablet of crocin, one tablet of an antibiotic, etc., and across the whole country. And the other is the pharmacy players, the e-pharma platforms, where I've also started to go to, because I find that I can buy large volumes and get a 20% discount. But having said that, let's look at some of the basic problems that exist in the pharma supply chain. And the most important one is that the pharmacy business or the pharmaceutical business, for its own strange reason, does not have any barcodes. And I think that's the first and biggest challenge to managing any kind of supplies for every single strip. I know in Guardian, we used to struggle to stick our own barcodes. It was all done manually, and you will end up, because of manual errors, you will have the wrong barcode pasted on the wrong strip. So first one is the barcodes. Second is if you look at the basic supply chain that exists in a city like Gurgaon, and I live in Gurgaon, where there are some 650 odd shops. From the distributor to the shop, the guy goes on a motorcycle or a cycle with multiple plastic bags, and each plastic bag has the requirement of the medicine of each shop, which is delivered by hand. So the whole question of being able to deliver large volumes to shops, it doesn't exist. Third point is that because there is very little barcoding, because there is very little technology intervention, and the value of the medicines is high, the majority of the losses that are taking place in every shop is pilferage of medicines, right? It's a very, very cash product that is going on. Fourth point is that stock taking is a serious issue in a shop. Most shopkeepers, most chemists or pharmacists do not have the ability to do a physical count of their shops. The next point is that because substitution is not allowed under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, you go into a shop and you will probably find 30 different types of the same salt, because it is being, every doctor sitting around the shop is prescribing differently. So it's a slightly long-winded answer to your question on how can technology be used. I think technology needs to start with first the manufacturer and the pharmaceutical industry to say, let me start to put a barcode on every single strip that is leaving my factory. And also remember one simple thing. I mean, I worked in multiple businesses. This is the only industry that I spent 15 years of my life in, where the manufacturer has no interest in the consumer. Manufacturer is only interest is the person who's writing the prescription. The person who's writing the prescription does not know who the patient is, and he knows who the patient is, but that prescription goes to the chemist who has zero interest in what the patient is doing. So, this defeats all logic from the manufacturer to the brand owner to the supply chain to the consumer. So I think there's a lot of basic changes that need to be made in the pharmaceutical retail business. And while I would love to say that, the pharmacy players or the e-pharmacy platforms have been able to do a lot of good things, I think getting to the 1.4 billion people and making sure that their medicine needs are met will still be met by small shops.
Right.
And I'll stop here.
Right. No, thank you. Thank you for that provocative ending as well. And, maybe Gaurav, if I can come back to you with one of the things that Ashutosh mentioned around just is e-pharmacy really improving access beyond geographies where anyway there was access to a neighborhood chemist. And how, even to the point that you were raising around therapy and improving health. Do you see these platforms fundamentally improving health? Or is it primarily about, availability, convenience, affordability, those aspects?
Look, improving health is a complex beast, right? Medicines are just one portion of improving health. And, I agree with a lot of what Ashutosh has said, but if you look at and we've been shocked when we looked at this data, but over the years, we've had a lot of interest from organizations that do real impact work in India, for instance, the Gates Foundation, etc. And at one point, when we looked at what 1mg's reach is in actually far-flung areas of the country, we were shocked at how much reach there is. Because in these far-flung areas of the country, the core problem is access, right? Healthcare, as we all know, accessibility is a huge problem in a country like ours. So, tier 3, tier 4 cities that we've never heard of, they are probably the fastest growing cities on 1mg platform. And the reason they are fastest growing areas is because, we have a website which is multilingual. It starts to cater to their language needs. Technology is a great enabler. Everyone can access the same brands across the country. There's logistics service that's available. And those are some of the fastest areas that grow. Probably 40% of our business comes from these tier 3, tier 4 places. And we're not just a metro phenomenon as, most, even we used to think at one point until we started to look at our data. So I think the other point to add, and Ashutosh is absolutely right, I don't think any ecosystem can survive without small businesses, but there's also a lot of value in consolidation that happens. A large part of why Indian pharma retail continues to stay probably subscale is because it is fragmented massively, and at an individual small pharmacy shop level, the costs don't make sense to build in technologies of scale, right? You can do it at a Guardian where you put your own barcode, but for an individual shopkeeper, there's just not enough scale money to start to have barcodes make sense. So I do think that, today e-pharmacies are maybe constrained. We definitely need both e-pharmacies and offline pharmacies to meet the needs of Indians. We are seeing a lot of, omni-channel is the new word. We truly believe that to actually meet the accessibility needs for the country, we need to be both online and offline. And across the board, there are lots of experiments going on to enable offline. But we have made already a significant dent in providing access to tier 3, tier 4 folks, even with the platform we have today. And we are going to continuously improve that access as we move forward.
Excellent. Great. Thank you for that. And, with that, let me also bring in Dr. Walia. And, a large, and especially in your position as part of ICMR, I think it's no surprise that a large part of the Indian population is underserved when it comes to matters of health. There's low diagnosis rates, low treatment rates, lack of infrastructure, lack of doctors, or, we know all of these issues. From an ICMR perspective, how do you think about increasing really access and availability in the tier 3, tier 4 cities that Gaurav mentioned? Getting the drugs there, and seems like that part is certainly growing. But how do you increase overall access to care? And do you see changes in terms of how people are using technology to diagnose diseases or to consult doctors remotely? How do you think about technology and the role that it could play beyond the larger cities?
Good evening, and thanks for inviting me to this very interesting suggestions and share the ICMR perspective. Yes, I did hear the viewpoints of the previous speakers, and I mean, I learned a lot from understanding that we are already making inroads into the tier 3 and 4 cities, and that has always been a concern. The last mile is always a challenge, but last mile is still very far for us. We still haven't reached there. It is not something that we can't imagine that the government schemes and interventions really don't go beyond the urban settings or the metro cities. But then government has been focusing a lot in last few years on the universal health coverage, and some programs like free drugs and diagnostic initiative has been one of the key programs which have been initiated in 2015, and subsequently many states today are actually providing free drugs or free diagnostics to their populations. But supply chain has always been a problem. Even if you have a diagnostic, and there is a central supply for that, how do you really ensure that it reaches where it is supposed to reach? The supply chain, the last mile connectivity and availability, and also many a times when we talk about innovations in India, and how we should be able to utilize that and how to bring more partners into innovation as well as the manufacturing. We talk about the volumes, but then how do you really come up with the volumes if there is no demand for it? And that's what I think these disruptors in the health technologies, they will be able to give us a fair kind of an opportunity that we reach the populations who need them the most. And we have already seen that happening in COVID. Initially, when the app was launched, I was myself apprehensive. The app was in English. How is someone, the COVID app where you were supposed to register and through which you were going to access the vaccine program, how are you going to do it? But then once you raise these challenges, I have seen that these challenges do get addressed. So these disruptors are something, they will provide us opportunities, but then they will also provide us a lot of challenges with which the current healthcare system has to keep up with. For example, we are everyone these days is wearing that the fitness devices where you are capturing your steps, it is capturing your heart rates, your blood pressure. But then where is all that data going, and who's monitoring that data? And that data is actually can be provide a very good insight where you need the prevention interventions to be focused. So there is a lot of constructive stuff, I think, that can be done with these disruptors that we all are technology disruptors that we are discussing today. And the other most important thing is, I think, what quality of these devices or diagnostics or the drugs which are being provided on these platforms. I would just like to raise one issue here with 1 milligram and the online availability of not singling out 1 milligram. Please don't take an offense to it. All such platforms where antibiotics are made available online. I really hope, I have never accessed them online, so I don't know, but I hope we are insisting on the prescriptions, and because there are some antibiotics which can be made available on the prescription only. So these are, because I coordinate the antimicrobial resistance program, and we see how antibiotics are being consumed all across the country. They are replacing the paracetamol or vitamins, as they say in some situations, even when they are not needed. So that's why, I think these technology disruptors in healthcare are most welcome. They will definitely help us in a broad-based transformation if we are able to deal with them well. But then I think the policy and the regulation also needs to keep up with the technologies that we will be seeing in future.
Great, and we will come back to that question on policy and regulations.
I can
But
just,
Gaurav, if you want to come
if
in.
I can just address one thing, because I want to make sure, I can say this on behalf of actually the online pharmacy industry. And we all know how the offline pharmacies operate in terms of access to medicines with or without prescription. So I won't go there to comment. But when it comes to online, we are actually very, very stringent on prescriptions, because everything that you do online maintains an audit trail. So every medicine that we dispense, every order that we take is actually against and meets all the laws of the land. There are prescriptions. In fact, we more than prescriptions, we also have very stringent guidelines on the duration, etc. We cannot dispense beyond. If a prescription is old, we don't even entertain those prescriptions. So I just wanted to put that out here and give you that comfort that probably safer than any other pharmacy mode that exists in the country today.
Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification, Gaurav. But if I continue on one theme which Dr. Walia picked up, because just using CoWIN for registration, and that was a great example of how digital came in to make sure that we actually had records for the whole nation almost with specific UHIDs, etc., and so on. Ashutosh, in your experience, as you think about healthcare more broadly and not just pharma, how open and how receptive really has the ecosystem been in terms of adopting digital tools and digital technology? And there have been, the financial services sector or in some senses the consumer sector, they have seen more rapid adoption of technology than necessarily healthcare has. Why do you think that is, and what needs to change?
I think, Parijat, the example that Dr. Walia gave of vaccines is a very, very important factor. And I served on the board of Gavi for 8 years as a member of the executive committee, and I continue to be a Gavi board ambassador. I think, the example that she gave of CoWIN is probably spoken about all over the world because of the incredible way technology was used by the government, but even more important, how every single human being in our country using their own smartphones or even their regular phones was able to access a lot of the technology and make sure that their records were correct and so on.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think technology. If you look at healthcare as a large block of business, it is a huge number of things. Whether it's starting with hospitals, whether it's tertiary hospitals or even the private or one and primary health centers on the other, whether it is imaging, whether it is laboratories, whether it is vaccination, whether it is even appointments that a company like Practo was doing, started off for doctors. I think the technology is coming in a very, very big way. And I believe, platforms like Gaurav's platform are just the forerunners of what we in India will begin to see in terms of how technology will change the lives of the common person. I mean, I've been talking of telemedicine for the last 30 years. The large satellite companies, including a Hughes Network Systems, etc., used to talk of those huge VSAT-based telemedicines. But today, I see doctors conducting surgeries using robotic arms, etc., and a whole lot of other things. So I do believe that the technology this is just the beginning. I do believe that we in India have the positivity and the ability to be able to grab latest technology. We have generally managed to leapfrog one generation every time something new comes up. I'm a great supporter of what our government is doing now in terms of healthcare and how it's opening up such a large number of opportunities across different spectrums of healthcare. So I just believe that things will be positive. You've got whole artificial intelligence coming in. I was, interviewing somebody on my podcast platform, and they actually have started to build Indians overseas have started to build devices to be able to train our own brain, which is then managing to make significant changes in the way our brain is going to respond to our own internal challenges. If you look at traditionally devices, in Indians basically had a glucometer, a thermometer, a blood pressure meter, which are the only 3 devices, and maybe a stethoscope which a doctor used. But now suddenly there is a plethora of devices. Dr. Walia spoke about the watch that we are all using, fitness, etc. But there are more and more devices coming, and Indians are at the forefront. So I think the healthcare industry using technology is just about beginning to see early gains, and the upside is going to be very substantial.
Got it. And Dr. Walia, if I can come back to you with your perspectives on this, that technology will certainly play a very big role. I think we are all in massive agreement on that. At the same time, I think the lack of digital data or the lack of integrated information across different stakeholders, insurance companies, doctors, hospitals, patients, that certainly has been a challenge that we have grappled with as a country. Now, one of the things that the government has spoken about is the digital health mission, and then now more recently about the UHI. If you can talk a little bit more about what are the possibilities you see with UHI, or indeed with some of the digital programs on health that the government is looking at.
So I will not be able to address the digital health mission because that is not something that I do, but then I can definitely talk about how the digitalization can actually benefit the healthcare program in our country. So there is no second thought to it that, the digitalization has been delayed. I mean, we are already late at digitalizing our healthcare system. In fact, private sector hospitals have done very well on that, and whosoever we work with are actually, they have sometimes their own, every hospital has their own IT system through which they collate the patient records, whether it is diagnostics or whether it is the treatment given or the length of the stay and everything. I have seen in India hospitals which are pretty much paperless. And those hospitals can actually help us, get past this challenge of not being able to digitalize our healthcare facilities. And that actually leads to a lot of problems. We are not able to, as I said, the supply chain is a problem. Disease burden assessments is a problem. You can put diagnostic machines in district levels, but then if they are not really connected to your any central facility, even surveillance is a problem. So something as basic as surveillance of a disease cannot happen if you don't have an IT system and if digitalization is not there. But now there is I think COVID has been a great teacher for all of us in all aspects, especially the healthcare. And we know that we need to, if we want to supply certain diagnostic tests to a certain place, at least we want to know what is the population which is going to require it. Because for the vaccine, the mandate initially was very clear, 18 and above. For some 40, 45 and above, and later it shifted to 18 and above. And then that's how we use our IT systems. But now I think government is focusing on that. And once that happens, we will really benefit from it at an individual level, at the level of the hospital, as well as at the level of the government. One of the key challenges for the government, I think, is whenever we talk about lower, allocations, funding allocations, where is the burden to really ask for? That evidence is not there. Anecdotal evidence sometimes it really doesn't work. If this is the evidence that, okay, these many people are going to be affected by diabetes, these many people are going to be requiring some surgeries, that's where the Ayushman Bharat has to put the money. And that's why what I think will be one of the key accomplishments from having an extensive digitalization of the healthcare systems.
Got it. Gaurav, if I can come to you with a parallel question, which is, some of these challenges that we are seeing in India, and they are not unique. I mean, the scale is probably certainly different in India, but there are, similar challenges have been seen in other parts of the world as well. What are some learnings that you think we could actually look at from other markets, whether it is in terms of the core business model itself, or whether it is just in terms of initiatives for digitalization, initiatives for interoperability, initiatives for kind of making sure that we have shared at least anonymized data and so on. What are some learnings that we could use to leapfrog, as Ashutosh was saying earlier?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's a tough question as well. Countries are at different stages of evolution when it comes to healthcare, digital data, etc. And that's one area where maybe I'll disagree a little bit, because even though the data might be digital, so there are two parts to the data problem, right? One is your data digital, right? And the second is, can it be accessed to actually draw any reasonable conclusions, right? And we all know that in countries like the US, for instance, the problem is not the data not being digital. The problem is actually that the data can't be accessed, right? Under these very, very constrained laws, which claim privacy and then don't even share anonymized data, right? And basically gives healthcare providers sort of control over patients because the data is inaccessible. And, I lived for many, many years in the US, and when we were moving back to India, we actually wanted to move our data back too, because, my wife was pregnant at the time, and we were like, hey, we want all her records. And what we got? Even though all the data with the hospital that we used to go to was digital, we actually got 400 sheets of printed paper, because that's the only thing they were allowed to give. And we actually went to our workplace at the time, and we basically scanned 400 sheets of paper and ended up with the PDF, right? So even though Western countries have done a great job digitizing ecosystems, that data is not accessible. And I think that, going back to Ashutosh's point, I actually do think that India has a real shot at leapfrogging not just the digitization of data, but actually the accessibility of data, right? Because we are creating laws and frameworks today when this is a recognized need, and the downsides of that system are reasonably well understood. I think the second thing is that I think we can learn is what are more than what provisions are there. I think we can learn what ecosystem enables this move towards digitization, sharing of data, movement of data seamlessly. And I think it's really important, in my view, to have a very robust payer economy, right? And the problem is that because India is a retail paid healthcare market, there is really no strong force that can actually push hospitals. Hospitals are digitized today, but almost every hospital uses its own health information system. The data is not transferable. So I can't go from hospital A to hospital B, have my records seamlessly transferred. And so actually the care that I got in one place, that history is not useful in the other place in the same way. If you look at standardization of data, like ICD-10, allowing ICD-10 for diseases, allowing for diagnostics, India doesn't use any of those frameworks today for the most part. So I think that what we can think about is less provisions and more ecosystems that are needed to actually move this journey forward. I think a lot of what's happening on the NDHM side, because now the government is becoming one of the biggest enablers for one of the largest populations, right? And if you want to play in the 500 million population, right, which is half the freaking country, if you want to play in that ecosystem, you've got to play by the rules that the government's putting in place, right, which is around standardization of data, portability of data, etc. Right? So I think it's a challenge for those who exist in that ecosystem today, and it's also a huge opportunity to access a hitherto inaccessible class, right? So that's what I think we should be doing.
Got it. I know we have a few minutes still left. Would you like to sum up, your summary view in terms of how you see the stage of health tech today, and how do you see it evolving? And then I'll come to Ashutosh and Dr. Walia as well.
Now, look, my view is that I think we are starting to get to, when we started 1mg, I think even this journey seemed like a pie in the sky. And I think today we are very fortunate to be where we are. I do believe that e-pharmacies, e-diagnostics, integrated health tech platforms are here to stay reality. We got a great boost in the arm when COVID happened, right? And I think a lot of healthcare disruption in the country didn't happen because of platforms like us. Online pharmacy, diagnostics became designated as essential services.
Yeah.
And that was a huge moment of recognition for us. I think from here on out, each one of us and the whole healthcare ecosystem as a whole, and I don't mean online, offline, etc. I think just the whole healthcare ecosystem, we think there are bigger problems that can be solved, bigger problems in supply chain. I know there's tremendous amounts of supply chain innovation happening in the country. Just in the regulation side also, there's a lot of stuff happening from a manufacturing of, let's say, APIs, etc. in the country as well. But overall, there's just a lot of innovation happening in supply chain. There's talk about blockchain, non-repeatability of medicines, authenticity, ensuring that supply chain is kosher. There's a lot of that work happening. Even on the therapy side, I think we are starting to go deeper and deeper into therapies.
Yeah.
People are building purely digital tools to help you diagnose disease conditions. It's starting with things like dermatology, but it's soon coming to aspects like mental health, etc. Right? So that's another huge initiative. So my view of the healthcare ecosystem is that we have scaled one mountain, but we have many more mountains to scale. And I think we are better prepared than we've ever been from a vision of, let's say, the country's government perspective, from a regulations perspective, from a healthcare startup ecosystem perspective, to actually go scale those mountains. And we are very, very excited about where we can go.
Excellent. That's great to hear. Ashutosh, what's your take on the topic?
So, I think I would agree with everything that Gaurav has said or Dr. Walia has said. I think, see, from my perspective, when I look at it now from the outside, and having spent a long time running a chain of pharmacies, technology is basically the enabler. And I don't think it will ever be a bottleneck for people in India. One, because we know the technology. Second, we understand it and we are very quick to grab it as users. I think what is more important is delivery, whether it's insurance. Let's go one by one. To get an insurance claim passed in a hotel, in a hospital, it's a nightmare. And I'm sure people are aware of that. I went through this because I was admitted in hospital in COVID. Whether you look at any of the tests that you're trying to get, I think somewhere along the line, that delivery is of the service, whichever segment of healthcare we are in, needs to be looked at very closely.
Yeah.
The third part is, we've spoken a lot about the supply chain, but I think the supply chain, we must still remember that almost 30% of the medicines in our country are still fake or underpowered. And I think we need to do this very carefully. I used to run the largest number of hospital pharmacy chains, and I know the nightmare that existed in the pharmacies inside government hospitals in UP and some of the other states. Nothing has changed. I think that needs to, because that's where the common man is going to be affected. And finally, I think doctors are still the superstars of the entire healthcare ecosystem. If a doctor takes a call on not using a particular medicine or not using a particular store or not using a particular facility, end of discussion. So I think that whole process needs to be managed a little more carefully, because I know almost every pharma player in whichever segment treats the doctor, because the doctor is the primary generator of all the revenues, with kid gloves. So I think there's a lot of potential, a lot of possibilities, a lot is happening, but I think a lot more needs to be done.
Well begun, but still a long way to go. Dr. Walia, what would be your closing thoughts, and especially given, I think, the fact that the government, unless the government really picks this up in a major way, which it has started to, it really will not make a difference to the majority of Indians. I think for that to happen, the government has to step in.
Yeah, health has been the state subject, and government is definitely very much involved with the delivery of healthcare, whether it is the regulators, or whether it is the system, healthcare system, which goes up to the PHC level. So I think innovation definitely has a lot of potential. It's a game changer. In next few years, we will see the impact of it. We are already seeing how telemedicine became so common during the COVID times. Almost everyone was talking to their doctors online. And the way, the internet has made inroads into even the villages. So that, I think, holds a lot of potential. Besides that, I would just like to briefly touch on what are the innovations happening in the devices and the diagnostic space, especially. Diagnostics were earlier mostly imported in our country. But in last few years, what we have seen is that there's a lot of innovation happening within the country in the diagnostic space. And for that, we really need to create frameworks again, so that we are able to at least move those innovations from development to the user who need them. Because there are many innovations in the diagnostics which will really reduce the expenditure on drugs or therapy, especially related to cancer. There are many such examples. If you are able to find out whether the cancers are resistant to any of the drugs. So innovation in health sector is just beginning to happen, I think. And but one thing which I would definitely like to highlight here is that, the partnership with the current incumbent, that will be the key to the broad-based transformation that we are looking for in next few years. So keeping up with what we have right now and improvising on that would be the key to success, I think. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Dr. Walia, Ashutosh, Gaurav, thank you very much for joining this session and for giving us your valuable and interesting thoughts. Thank you very much again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into ET India Boardroom. Stay tuned for more.